So I've been doing games for 15 years now, and there's something I learned the hard way is that a lot of people, we lose a lot of people in this industry because they make great games, but they have no idea how to properly manage a group of people and how to be successful at driving a company forward. Because at the end of the day, it's all about how you, as a studio, how you manage to keep creating great games, but also maintaining an organization and be intelligent about what the right opportunities are for you. So you have seen how we have worked in the past few years at Casual Connect in order to drive independent development, independent game studios and independent development towards Casual Connect, and now we have a space called the Indie Showcase. And one thing that we continuously see is that we have a lot of game developers who are creating really, truly great games, but a lot of them just create one game because there's a lot of things that are not just about creating a great game, but also about how much to maintain the studio. So a few months ago, I decided to organize a panel, and I'm not really fond of panels, and those who have heard me speak before know this well. But a few years ago in Casual Connect in Hamburg, in Casual Connect 2010 in Hamburg, we did a different type of panel. We basically got together with 3 other studio managers, and we talked about if it was important to create your own IP or not create your own IP. But the gist of the panel was that we had a conversation in front of everybody, like a conversation that we will have in the hallway. And that's what we're going to do today. Today, we're going to be talking among ourselves. We're going to be interrupting each other. We're not going to be as polite. And the important thing is that I really would like you guys to raise your hand. Because I wanted to make it as interactive as possible, and also I want to make it as fruitful as possible for all of you. And you might have questions that I didn't think about. So it's very important that we make this as interactive as possible, because your survival as an independent game development studio is key for the success of this industry. So we want to help you become successful as managing your studio so you can create more great games. So we have 4 different very interesting people, and each of them have done different types of games. And I'll let each of them introduce themselves while I'll play a video of the game. So can you introduce yourself?
Hello. Sorry. Hello. I'm Shan Tan. I'm a producer at Red Loop Asia. We make console games now, but it didn't always start out that way. Our first game was actually, well, it's time for some jetpack action. So, basically, when we started, we made a small Flash game, and we completed it and then launched it just in time for Independent Games Festival. And it was made with a 2-man team, and after we launched it, it got maybe a little bit of press and a little bit of thing, but it was really the wrong way to do it. So luckily we recovered from that, because at the Independent Games Festival they nominated it for 3 awards, so we had another chance, and we took that chance to basically launch our PlayStation 3 game properly. So we spent a year getting it to PlayStation 3 with a 5-man team, and then after that brought it to PlayStation Vita with another small team. And we're now working on the next-gen console. And that's enough about me, I think.
Great. So, Ian, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Ian. I'm from Witching Hour Studios. I'm the creative director over there. I'm new to the game industry. I came over from advertising, so I've come in with a very naive perspective of game making. We've done one game called Ravenmark. It's been out for about a year, It's a turn-based strategy game, and we are also doing the multiplayer sequel to this game right now, along with some other game ideas. Beyond that, we are kind of young, and we have a very idealistic view of running a company, so that's kind of the position I'm coming from. Yep.
That's the trailer of your latest game, right?
Yeah, this is
Mercenaries?
the trailer for Mercenaries. It's very story heavy. We believe a lot in investing in our IP, and that's kind of what we've done so far. And we're going to continue to do so for a while to come. Yeah.
And it's worth mentioning that both of you guys are based here in Singapore.
Yes, yep, pretty much. We are nearly an all Singaporean company.
I set up Rat Loop Inc. in the US in '98, so it's a long time ago. We shipped a couple of games. Then moved here to Singapore, and then saw some opportunities. Like MDA had like lots of schemes to get developers to start making games. So I submitted for an application for a grant, and when I received it, decided to go and make the game, and have been making that particular game ever since until now, till the next sequel, which we're planning now.
All right, so now Jan is going to introduce himself.
Yeah, sorry that the only video I found to illustrate what we do is a video that shows my face. So I am Jan from Sanuk Games. I started Sanuk Games in Bangkok 9 years ago, and it is still surviving, although it never got rich. So I'm pretty much the case study for this panel, in fact. So what we have been doing over the years, at first we were a small outsourcing facility, and we took small deals of whatever we could do, tech and art. Then finally we jumped on the Nintendo bandwagon in 2006, and we released 30 retail SKUs of DS and Wii games for various publishers. So we were basically contract development house for mid-sized publishers, and that was where we made quite significant money, but it was only during 2 years, and after that Nintendo consoles faded away. Then we reinvented ourselves as a mobile plus console self-publishing company. So we published a couple of casual games. Some we made by ourselves, and some also we licensed from other studios. Like we licensed iPhone games, PC games, to port them on consoles and to publish them on our own and share the revenue with the studios. This is one business model that kept us surviving for the last couple of years.
Don't miss that.
Great. And lastly, Mr. Natsume, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi. I'm Chris Natsuume. I co-founded BoomZap with my partner Alan Simonson, who's back in the back there, in 2005. I've actually been making games myself since I think I shipped my first game in 1993, so that's about 20 years. We started as a small virtual studio with Alan here in Singapore. I was in Seattle at the time, now I live in Japan. And we also had an artist in Malaysia. And since then, we've grown to 85 people, still working totally virtually in, and let me see if I can get this right, Ukraine, Russia, Georgia, Japan, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines. I think that's everywhere. Did I say Singapore? Yeah, Singapore. In that time, we've done games for iOS, we've done games for PC, for Mac. Largely, our business in the last few years has been making HOPAs, these hidden object puzzle arcade games for Big Fish Games. We've released, I think, 12 of those on PC, Mac, and those all are going to iOS and Android as well. Most of those hit #1, so we've been marginally successful through that time. So that's us.
Good. And I was showing you the German version of Awakening, because you are everywhere with your games, and that's an important thing to be.
That's in actually 11 languages, last I checked. So
There you go.
13 languages. 13.
There you go.
I'm sure those 2 Swedish men enjoyed it.
So another important thing when we were building this panel, putting this panel together, was I wanted to bring studio managers from game studios who had slightly different profile, because as you can see, each of them build games for different platforms and different audiences. So I would love for you, Sian, to talk about a little bit you being making this really great IP, and you have been porting it to different platforms. So last night we were just talking about what your experience has been, and can you talk about a little bit about how your experience the past few years has been across the different platforms that you have been?
Yeah, we found that for us, we have a single player game mostly when we first launched it. So getting it out on different platforms, like we started on the PlayStation 3. We could iterate and like improve whatever we had for the Flash-based version of the game, and then made it stereoscopic 3D. Used like all the major features of the stereoscopic 3D features of the PlayStation in order to push our game in line with what Sony was pushing at the time. And then after that, decided to found out they were pushing the PlayStation Vita, and then decided to make that jump and update our engine and get us onto the latest Fire engine and get it out onto that platform, which was also relatively new and within a fairly short amount of time. Meanwhile, we actually took our game, a PlayStation 3 game, and then arranged together with a porting house to get it out on Steam. So we're also on Steam, and then now we're actually in a pretty good position to bring it onto the PlayStation 4. So we've noticed that every time we put it up on a different port, on a different platform, some platforms work better for your games, and some platforms work less good. So you could get it out on you could think oh, my iOS game, let's get it out on Steam, let's put it on PC, right? And but we found that really you want to tailor make your games, particularly for a platform. Necessarily what works well on the Vita might not really work as well on the PC. So yeah, every time we get it out on a new platform, we can iterate it again, and we've noticed that with every time that you ship a new game on a new platform, the old platform just get a little spike on sales. So yeah, it makes sense. For us, I started making Rocket Birds in 2009, beginning of 2009, and then ever since then, we've basically been working on the first Rocket Birds game, right? In its different forms, from the 2D version of Flash and the 3D version, as well as the Vita version, and then wherever it's going now. When you start your game, most importantly, I had to be sure that I would be able to work on the same game for the next 4 or 5 years, basically, right? Because that's what I've been doing. But it makes sense, and it's important you know that the first time you might not get it right.
Right.
On the Vita, we actually did better than on the PlayStation 3.
And that's important to mention, right? Because sometimes the numbers the public numbers might tell you something otherwise, but your relationship, the relationship that you build with the owner of the platform might make a huge difference to you, right?
Yeah, that too. We've had good support from Sony Asia as well as SCEA America and also Europe and Japan. They've all been very, very supportive to get developers onto their platform. The most important thing I realized, PlayStation 3 is 70 million consoles, right? And PlayStation Vita is now 5 million consoles. Mm-hmm. But really, those 5 million consoles, getting your game out on a console that is got a much more dedicated audience. They have less games. So compared to we have about maybe on the Vita 150 games compared to on the iOS where there's 150 games per day.
Right.
So that's the big difference. So when you look at your market, might not necessarily be the biggest one. As long as you can get yourself noticed, that is the most important thing.
And that is one of the lessons learned, and it's one of the things that we're going to be talking today, which is, it's you might look at the market, and it doesn't necessarily need to be what everybody else is doing, and these are things that you're going to start to make decisions on. It's not just about making a great game, but what platform I'm going to put it on.
Can I cut in there?
Yes.
Juan? So one thing to think about, though, in all of this, you're like, oh, what kind of strategic decision am I going to make about which platform am I on or whatnot? I mean, the first question you're going to make as a small independent studio is, how am I going to pay to build a damn thing? And that decision drives so much of what you're doing, right? And you have this strategy, yeah, we want to be on Vita or we want to be on iOS or whatever. And then you go out, and if you can't find somebody who's willing to invest in your studio to pay for that, or a publisher who's willing to invest to pay for that, well, your strategy doesn't mean shit. You're going to have to do something else, right?
How big are like typically like on an IO like this generation of like people studios like making games for iOS? It's not very much bigger than, or not much smaller than what we're doing it with, like a 5-man team, right? I mean,
Yeah.
No, I mean, I would say that for Ravenmark, the reason why we went to iOS was for the very simple reason it was the lowest barrier of entry. It was easiest to do. I mean, Sony at that time were a little bit more particular about who they're going to take on. You know, they weren't so open to indies as yet. You know, it would have to be an introduction from another studio, or it would be, you know, maybe the government stepping in and saying like, you know, let's offer these games to Sony and things like that. But it's especially for us, because when we came in, like I said, I did not come from the game industry. I came in when I was half in school. My business partners were people that were not from the game industry as well. So where do you start there when you have no context whatsoever? iOS was great for that because, you know, all you have to do is pay $100, look at how to put it up, and that's kind of where we stepped up from. So, you know, picking a platform to get on, it would be easiest if the platform were absolutely open to anybody versus requiring an introduction or a lot of you know, putting a lot of money down to start. I mean, buying kits for you know, for the PS3, that's money that some indies just don't have.
And Ian, that's an important point that we were talking about last night. You, for example, you have focused on making your game for iOS. Now you're making the Android port, and then you're going to work on the PC port. Can you talk a little bit more about the fact that you're working on a game that you're extending across platforms? So
yeah. I mean, we start with the lowest barrier of entry, which was iOS. The next thing is that the beauty is that we started on Cocos 2D. I'm sure some of the designers, some of the companies here would know that. And it was very easy to move over to 2DX. And 2DX allows us to deploy on Android and PC with little to no work except interface corrections. And so that it's a much cheaper way to go about it. You know, build for something that can kind of fund the next thing.
If I may say something, I would not quite agree with the idea that iOS is the lowest barrier of entry. It would seem so if you look at the fact that you just need an iPhone and a Mac and $100 per year registration. But that's not what defines the barrier of entry. The barrier of entry on iOS is the fact that there are 800,000 damn applications on the App Store.
Which is exactly why we put it on iOS, because how many tactical RPGs are there on the iOS?
I don't know.
Yeah, so
maybe there are a lot.
Yeah.
You just don't know that.
yeah, but I mean, the well-known ones probably maybe I can count it on both my hands. So the reason why we said that was okay because we knew that there wasn't that much competition. Yeah. If we did a puzzler, okay, that's it. We're gonna get sunk right at the bottom of your 80,000 apps. It depends on the game you want to make.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But if you go on PS Vita, and indeed there are as many applications in the console's lifetime as per day on iOS or Android, then you have visibility for free. You don't have to acquire users. I mean, it baffles me that on iOS you have to pay to acquire users who will play your game for free. Think about that.
That's assuming you're doing a free-to-play game. If you guys don't know, Ravenmark retails for $10, which is very odd on iOS. And that perceived value is what drives what we have. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about when you launched? You didn't launch for $10.
Yeah, we launched for $3, and people were complaining, and they were saying it's too expensive, and you know, $3 whole. You know, I can buy three smaller games for $1 each, and you know, we had a lot of complaints. And you know, after a while, we just went straight up to $10, and people went, "Oh my God, it's so valuable! It's like half the price of Final Fantasy Tactics, and it's the same. It's the same experience. Why not? You know." So perceived value is very important for an indie company. You know, charge people what it's actually worth. Don't think that because everyone else is selling it at 99 cents, so should I. That's a terrible way to step in.
And it helps that you have a background in marketing and advertising, right?
We actually, because I come from advertising, I know its value. I know where to go to get that. And for iOS, it's definitely Touch Arcade. I would say that majority of our sales came from the fact that we put it up put advertising on Touch Arcade for just a week, and it paid for itself in about 2 or 3 days.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, I don't think that many studios do, especially in their first game, would actually go and do a banner ad on like popular websites. But I think that's like the surefire way to get any kind of visibility, especially on that platform.
And the thing about advertising on a website is that people from other other websites will go there and see it and go, "What's this?" and they review it, and it propagates itself that way, which is really good. I mean, the extra reviews definitely helps. You know, honestly speaking, we didn't really go to anybody, but we had a massive amount of reviews. I mean, we hold an 85 on Metacritic, which is very rare because we really, beyond advertising on Touch Arcade, we did nothing. We were like, what do we do now? We can't do anything. We have no money. So, you know, knowing that one place where you can get the most eyeballs on it really counts.
Totally. And that's part of what you learn as a studio manager. You know, we're not talking about game design, as you can see. There's a lot of other things that you will have to learn in order to be successful in the game industry. Jan, Ian was talking about building his own IP, putting in all these different platforms. You do something that is slightly different, which is you take IP that is available in different platforms and you're putting in consoles, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about that specifically?
Yeah, we made that decision because, in fact, we at first, when we went on PlayStation Minis at the time and DSiWare and we went with very simple games on which we had experience, like Spot the Differences, Crosswords, Sudoku, and we saw what it brought in terms of revenue. I cannot disclose the figures because Nintendo and Sony would not allow me to do so. But what I can tell is that I mean, it's enough, the gross revenue we made out of this was enough to pay for the development of a game for which we had full expertise, or the porting of a game, but certainly not original creation from scratch, at least not for what it costs us to do it, because it's like we have to push people internally to come up with worthwhile ideas. It's a bit difficult. So I decided that probably the best way to do it on these platforms was to tap into the oodles of existing games on iOS at the time, try to talk to the guys and say, hey, you're on iOS, you're focusing on mobile, you're not focusing on consoles because that's not your, I mean, you have limited resources. So what we can do is that we will take your game, if you're willing to share the source code and everything, we will port it and publish it on our own and share the revenue with you. So we would basically have on our end a lower marginal cost, and we would make a business out of that. And it worked quite well for a number of games we did. So yeah, it is a possibility. If you are positioned on a platform that is, I would say, a secondary platform, and some studios are not willing to target that platform because they don't have time, or they want to dedicate their resources to something else, then you can make this sort of deal, and it worked for us.
That's great. And lastly, I mean, Chris, you have a completely different experience. You've been building a studio that found a niche, let's say, with the hidden object puzzle adventures, and you've been able to build all these franchises with a really good partnership with a publisher. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so basically I have two favorite kinds of money, right? My most favorite kind of money is royalties, right? Everybody loves that. That's just money, right? You know, here, have some cash. My second favorite kind of money is publisher money, right? I'm not a big fan of investment. I'm not a big fan of bringing people into your studio and selling parts of your studio. I'm not a big fan of advertising money. But I'm a big fan of bringing a publisher into a relationship, because that money comes with a publisher. It comes with somebody who's invested in your product. And so our first game that we worked with, our biggest publishing partner by far, by orders of magnitude, is Big Fish Games. And we've had a great relationship with them. Our first title with them was Awakening. And not only did we get production money to develop that game, we also got their support in pushing that game. So part of the deal with Big Fish was they're going to take their game and put it in front of this big, huge audience that they've already built. They've got those eyeballs for us already, and they're going to put it in front of those eyeballs. They had people internal to their team that helped us with production, that helped us with data. You know, they've made a lot of these hidden object games, and they know how they're supposed to be made. And if you're good at working with a publisher and you're open-minded to listening to their criticisms and trying to work with them in a constructive way, you can really increase the value of your game. I mean, I have an enormous respect for what we're hearing at this end of the table of people who kind of went and did it their own and did their own development and, you know, hey, we did it alone. And I think there's a great indie spirit there, and I don't look down on people who do that. I think that's a wonderful thing.
Can I just ask? I mean, we were offered many times from multiple publishers, but at least for us, we found that a lot of the publishers did not offer, you know, that opportunity to have them pay to produce the game. It's very rare nowadays. Can I safely say that?
Yes, but I think it's different. If you come to a publisher and you're like, I want to make a tactical, you know, iOS sim, yeah, there's not a lot of people who are going to drop money for that.
Yeah.
Now, you go to Big Fish Games, who makes a hidden object game a day, and you're really good at what you do, and you say, I'd like to make some of what you're making a bunch of money on, and I've got a track record of making good titles, yeah, then you can get them to pay for it. But there's going to be, when you work with a publisher, there's just a much larger level of compromise that you're going to have to work with, because you're going to have to build what they know they can sell. And I think a lot of indies get real frustrated. I was actually just over in the indie showcase talking to some folks, and they were like showing me a game, and I was like, this is a really nice game. And they're like, what publisher should I bring this to? And I was like, none. There's no publisher that wants this. And they're like, oh, well, it's not good? I'm like, no, it's good, but there's no publisher that wants this game. You're going to be much better off trying to do what the guys at this end of the table are doing, do it yourself and do your own marketing, do that, and find that niche audience that this particular game is and build that as your audience. Yeah. For me to go out and say, I'm going to compete with Big Fish Games in hidden object games, that's crazy talk, right? They own those old ladies. And so it's much better for me to just say, you know, here, you take a big hunk of my money and let's sell this stuff to these old ladies together, and we'll make a lot more money that way. So it's different for different types of games and different types of studios. But yeah, it is very difficult. And especially, I'll tell you a story. There was a studio, a large international publisher whose name will remain unrevealed for this story. And I was talking to them about trying to get $35,000 out of them to make a match 3 game. This was about 6 years ago. And $35,000. How hard can it be to get $35,000 out of a studio that, you know? And I got halfway through the meeting, and the guy stopped me, and he said, look, the problem is the green light process in our company, just to get this paperwork passed through and get somebody to say yes to this, costs us more than $35,000. Right? So it's going to cost us more money than the money you want just to get someone here to say yes, give them the money.
Does the company still exist today?
Yes, it does. It's a very, very large company with 2 initials. I'll let you go with that.
Yeah.
So anyway, at that point, you have to say, look, some titles you don't want a publisher for. Yeah. And if you can do it cheap and you can do it yourself, there's a great thing. Now, the stuff that we do, I mean, I know it doesn't seem like really high budget stuff, but we do very large data. There's a lot of art in our games. There's a lot of production quality in those. And that particular publisher, I have a lot of respect for Big Fish Games because they have put together a pipeline that works with small companies and can deal with much smaller budgets, you know, not multi-million-dollar budgets, but multi-$100,000 budgets. Not every publisher is that way.
So, and I would like to interrupt you right there because this is a very important point. When you are choosing a partnership, what are you looking for if you're an independent development studio? Like, what made you choose Big Fish, for example?
They threw money down on the table.
No, but besides that.
No, really, that was it. I
know a bunch of companies that they will throw money on the table and you won't take it.
No. At that particular time, and this is what I'm talking about. Everybody's got a, what was it, Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until you get punched in the mouth, right? And we went to a bunch of publishers and we were broke as shit and, hey, Big Fish threw money on the table. And all right, we needed money. We took it and we built a relationship from that. It wasn't a strategic decision from us. It was literally, nobody else is offering us money. Let's go with Big Fish. I don't know if any of them are in the room now. We still love you. But at that particular point in time, that was the sum total of my decision-making process was, they're putting money on the table, nobody else is putting money on the table, and I really need money right now.
Yeah, but that's the starting point. But the fact that you've been with them this long also means that the fit was good. I mean, what you wanted to make is what they wanted to sell.
I personally have a lot of respect for that particular publisher because I think for what they do, they're enormously targeted and enormously focused. Now, I think there are other publishers that have other niches that are enormously targeted. What is it? Paradox is a great example of one of the most focused companies you can think of in the world. Now, if I were to take my Match 3 game over to Paradox, they're not going to be able to do much with it, right?
Right.
But if I'm taking something that looks like, some of the stuff that they do, really great strategic, hardcore stuff, then they're going to be the right publisher for that. So I think there has to be a fit between what you want to do and what that publisher wants to do. Now, what I want to do is make money. And so there's a real great fit between me and Big Fish because they're down with that too, and I'm not real saucy about my game design.
In that case, there is a fit with all publishers.
I would call them actually platform holders. I think that's what you're saying. Like let's not confuse the two, right? I think that it is very important to get support of the platform holders, like be it like Big Fish Games with like a huge destination site, or like Sony, for instance, or like in my case, I think that is like all key important, especially if you want to get noticed. Right? I think visibility is key.
I think one thing that people don't think enough about publishers is who do they own, right? Big Fish owns a lot of fat old women in Ohio, right? And they know precisely what those women want, and they have their email addresses, and they know how to get hold of them tomorrow, right? And Paradox owns a lot of fat geeky dudes, and they know how to get a hold of those dudes tomorrow.
Yeah, so you want to make those kind of games on their platform, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like that's just complete common sense, but like people just don't do it. Like, I've seen so many studios like just.
This illustrates a point, which is that not only would you choose a publisher who is able to throw money on the table, but also a publisher who knows what they are doing.
Yeah, but we're in a very different age today, I would say, especially for anyone that's going to iOS or mobile. The thing to think about is that a lot of publishers in those arenas, right, they're not interested in putting money down right off the table. What they offer you is pretty much a platform of people that already play their games, right? And also, they pay for a bit of advertising, and they have some people they might know in Apple and things like that. But beyond that, especially for mobile, coming from someone who does mobile, right, a lot of publishers in mobile, you got to be very careful because very often they just want to make a little bit, they shave off the top of what you're making. I've heard horror stories of one particular game. The publisher said that we'll only take 20%, right? Which is all very well and good, but when the time came to do any kind of marketing and all that, they spent nearly nothing. And anytime there was an update, all they would do is send pretty much cold call emails to these various websites with just a few screenshots of the game without an explanation, without anything.
This is my experience as well. I guess, similarly as Chris, I wouldn't name any publisher here, but publishers who publish games on mobile would tell you, hey, I take your game, I do the marketing push, I don't give you any money up front, I will just take like 10 or 20% of the revenue from you. What they do is exactly that. They take your game, they take dozens of other games in the same month, and they see which games are going to perform, and the very little marketing push that they will make on those games, which may or may not be yours. So finally, you end up exactly in the same kind of relationship as if you were directly putting your game by yourself on the App Store, meaning that you are betting against the odds and etc.
Because the concept of publisher is changing. The thing is, that I think it's important to mention, is that the concept of publisher that Chris is talking is different from the concept of a publisher in the 21st century, and it's changing and it's evolving. And unfortunately, we're using the same terminology, and this is another very important point. We're using the same terminology for what a publisher is when we're talking about different roles. There's the publisher who provides funding in order to own the IP, in order to drive it forward for a particular audience, but also there's the publisher who comes in and says, I'm going to distribute your game exclusively, and then there's another publisher, and I just want to finish with this, because there's a problem with terminology.
But I think it's bullshit, right? I think it's flat out bullshit, right? Any publisher who comes to you and says, I want to publish your game, but I'm not going to give you any front money, tell them to go fuck themselves. Right, it's as flat as that.
In a more polite way, eventually.
That is the way it works now.
But that's not a publisher. Now, somebody can come to you and say, hey, I want to be your distribution partner. That's a different story.
Right.
Somebody can come to you and say, I want to be your marketing partner. But somebody comes to you and says, I want to be your publisher, but I want you to front all the money for your development, and then I'll help you. You're not a publisher. You're a distribution partner. You're a platform, right? A publisher gives you money to make your game. If I say nothing else to indies out here today, If they don't want, and it's not about the money. What it's about is about them having
Commitment.
skin in the game,
Yes.
right?
Commitment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if they're not putting money down, right, they're going to get your game, and they're a distribution partner, and they don't have any hurt. They'll put it out. If it does well, yeah, they'll support it because there's money in supporting it. If it doesn't do well, they'll let it sink because they don't care. Now, if they funded it, they're going to put money into making sure that it makes money because they got burned. There's skin in the game.
That's exactly my approach. In fact, I invest in things that I publish. If I am not the publisher, then I expect the publisher to invest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, that's the reason why we did it ourselves, not because we couldn't find somebody, but we couldn't find somebody that made sense. You know, the very basic concept of being really interested in putting something out there. Right now, it's kind of like it's a machine gun. You know, I have like 100 games out there, and if the ones that do well, I'll put a bit more money into that. If you don't do well, I'll forget about you and still collect the 20% from you.
And it's not just that they're taking your 30%. You can't do anything with it yourself now because it's tied up with these assholes.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And you're like,
Yeah.
okay, well let's
Please-
change the pricing.
Yeah,
Let's do
please
something.
read the fine print.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many contracts, right? If you do not read the fine print, number one, they will say that they own your IP, which is a huge thing, especially for someone like us. We believe very strongly in IP. Secondly, they have first right of refusal for any games that's related to that IP. These are the two things you got to be watching out for, because these are the things that will burn you if you are working on a very strong IP.
But even that, right? There's a lot of people say, oh, we don't own your IP, and we don't own first rights for the sequels, but we have exclusive publishing rights for it.
Yeah.
Well, what the hell does owning your IP mean anymore? If you don't have any right to do anything with it, yeah, sure, you own it. You can tell your friends you own it, I guess, but you can't do anything with it, right? And so, you have to be careful about what rights you're giving somebody. And especially if you're giving them the full marketing rights and exclusive publishing rights, etc., if they decide they don't want to do anything with it, you can't just say like, well, all right, I'll go do it myself. I'll change the price point myself. You can't do that. You're tied
Let me just interrupt on that because in the past few minutes, you guys have been talking about legal stuff. and I don't know if you just know this. You have
Because
been
we run
really down
studios.
into
That's
legal
what
stuff.
we do, man.
But that's exactly the point. What I would like for you guys to talk about is when do you realize I'm working all day and not just on game design, and I'm worried about legal stuff, administration stuff, and
8
business
years ago.
stuff.
Day one.
When you open a bank account, dude.
Yeah.
There you go.
No, when you sign to register your company name, that is the day you need to look for a lawyer, an accountant, and possibly some PR help if you.
How
only
many
want
of
to make
you
videos.
in the audience who started a game development studio thought about this on day one?
I still have not got a lawyer after 9 years, I must say. But I've been screwed a couple of times, I must say.
My argument has always been, if you can't afford a lawyer and an accountant, you can't afford to start a game studio. Like, you're not ready yet.
Yeah, if anything, at least have a lawyer friend at a minimum. Have a lawyer friend. Have an accountant friend. I can honestly say we haven't spent on an accountant and a lawyer, but we have them.
You got a lot of girlfriends.
Can I add something to the publishing thing just
sure.
now?
Yep.
Like a lot of, especially startup studios, they're wondering about like, I have no clue how to like launch a title. There's like a distinct movement within the publisher community, and they're like all moving over to PR, which is really what a lot of studios can use.
Yeah.
You can actually just contract a PR company, pay them a flat fee, and that'll get your name out there, and like they will help you, especially in the first time you launch a game, right? Like to tell you, oh, okay, you need like 3 trailers, you need like something here, and one at launch, and then things like that. Like you can actually pay for exactly that service. You don't have to like get your feet wet and like share ownership or like share any potential of like them stepping in later on saying like, look, we can take your title and bring it to whatever platform we want. Like you will retain full control because you're actually just paying somebody to do that part of the service that you have trouble with or that you can foresee that you might not have expertise in.
You might
It's
even have
extremely good advice.
Yeah, you could also bypass the PR altogether because there are a lot of what you call social. You talk about social media, right? But there are actually a lot of people who are influencers. For example, there are certain YouTube channels that have millions of users on them, and if you can just tie in with one of them, all right, that pretty much would pay. That it's free. It's absolutely free, and you can get the eyeballs on your game. So that's something I would also say. I mean, if you don't want to spend on PR.
There's a question from the audience.
Yeah, we had a question in the back. Go ahead.
Okay, the question is essentially, with looking at PR firms, that's something I've certainly looked at, but I haven't actually gone there because, yeah, they've got these great websites, for example, and stuff like that, but how can you actually really know they're actually decent PR firms? Do you have any sort of pointers on QAing, whether or not they're a decent PR firm that is worth giving any money to?
I would suggest, like, if you can, like, ask the platform holders, right? Like, they will know who does good jobs and who does less good jobs. The other thing is, like, PR companies are per region. Don't get one to do global PR for you. Like, get one for, like, Europe, or, you know, that knows Europe, that knows the place. Or
yeah,
one for
my
US.
experience, but it might be specific, is that really people who play the games will mostly get their information from the channels that distribute the game. Meaning that if they play a game on iPhone, they will just look at what's on the App Store, and there's only a very marginal amount of people who will ever read any media aside from that. And PR can only do so much. So the most you can hope with PR is to make a big push inside that tiny little amount of people who will get their information from outside the store, so that it may eventually transform into something organic inside the store. But that's all we can
I'd like
hope.
to add that, like, it depends on the kind of game that you make as well. Like, of course, if you have free to play or Facebook game, it's going to be different because you've got like talk and like people like pointing to you.
But
I'm not sure how that works actually.
Those channels can be really good. I mean, for instance, Big Fish has a forums channel, and we live in those forums channels. I have a user there. People know me there. Every time we release a game, I go on and introduce myself and, hey, we've released a new game. And there's a small, very vocal minority of people that play those games that are opinion leaders, right? And they'll go out and evangelize your game for you. And I think a lot of these different channels have that. In my previous life as a game developer, I did AAA first-person shooters. And we released a game called Far Cry back in 2004. And there's a very vocal group of forum people who were really into those kind of games. And we reached out to those people and gave them early builds and let them talk to some of the developers. We actually flew some people into the studio and let them look at early builds of the games. And those people went out and made a huge splash in the particular audience that we cared about. So you can reach out to your users. I would think less about, I want my mail to go to 10 million people, and more about, I want to make sure that I'm contacting the specific people who are interested in the thing that I am selling. And if you can get to a couple thousand of those folks who are really dedicated, then you can have them go out and evangelize your product for you. And there's a bunch of studios who've done a very good job with that.
I mean, if you look at the case study, I'm sure you guys, there's Kickstarter, and on Kickstarter, there's a new game called Divinity. It's a follow-through from other games, and they actually spoke to nearly every media company, and they have 200 of the major sites talking about them, your IGN, your GameSpot, and it did not drive any help to their Kickstarter. They spoke to 3 channels on YouTube: Total Biscuit, Angry Joe, and I think York's Cast, and that alone pretty much just pushed them over the edge, and they made a fuck ton more, simply put. So sometimes, right, just knowing the right channels to take might be better, and sitting down and actually thinking about these things matters as much as actually making the game.
So this leads me to correct my statement. I just didn't know the right channels.
Yeah,
no,
I
we need,
and it's going to be different per game. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah. Every game's going to have its own channels.
And per genre, per audience, but interestingly enough, you guys are all talking about establishing one-to-one relationships with your customers, and I would love if you guys can talk about that, because it's completely different than 15 years ago, right? I think a lot of game developers are still thinking of the old model is, I develop a game and then I get reviewers to review it, because everybody reads GameSpot, right?
No, fuck reviewers. Those guys are assholes.
Yeah. There you go. So let's talk about that.
You want to touch the actual person who's playing your game. I go out to Seattle and they have a Big Fish event where they bring in a whole bunch of these old ladies and they all go around their little rascal scooters and we chat with them and we let them play their games and we talk to them about their kids and we try to understand who we're making our stuff for. Right.
It could feed directly. I mean, in Ravenmark, right, at the main screen, right, there is a feedback button, and if you email that, one of us, as in one of the people that actually run Witching Hour Studios, will answer you, and we will talk to you, and we will see how we can help in any way. Do we tell us mechanics? Do you want something changed? What you like, what you didn't like? We have an immediate connection with the players, and we hold that very dearly.
We actually even went to the forums and hired one of the really active forum members and brought them on as a resident product expert, because we were like, you are exactly the person we're selling stuff to. Come over to our studio, work in our studio. And she's still active on the forum, she's still involved in that. But when we want to know, what does our user think about this thing that we're about to do? Well, I don't know, I'm like a dude, right? I want to talk to an old lady about it. And we've got one of them, right? Well, she's not that old, but she's there when we want to talk to her about what is it that you, our specific customer, wants in this game. And she's got really great opinions, way better than mine.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? No? I actually wanted to go over, and I know we have, 2 minutes left? Okay. I want to go over really quickly about your company structure. If you guys can talk, I know each of you have probably a different company structure, so are you, all of you in an office, or are you working remotely? So if you can talk a little bit about that so you can exemplify how you run your companies.
Okay, so I have a 9-man studio, soon to be. Before it was like 5. It's very much fairly flat. I have my fingers in everywhere because I have that really nasty habit of wanting to be everywhere. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I have Sandra, whose primary focus is to basically develop relations with and keep relations warm with other platform holders, publishers, and to do a lot of the biz dev stuff separately from what I do in the studio. So that's pretty much it.
We have a 10-man studio, and we have absolutely no hierarchy. There's everyone. We sit in a giant room with no walls, and we just chit chat and talk, and we play games, and we watch videos on YouTube. And that's the way I think an indie company should be, because it needs to feel like family. It cannot just be, the chance to make a giant ton of money. It has to mean more than that. We believe very strongly in what we do, and to have a group of people that share that belief, it drives you beyond just making the game. It's about creating an identity for ourselves and belonging somewhere. And that's something that I think any indie company needs to work for. Just because you started a company and you have people working for you, that doesn't mean that they work for you. You have to treat them like peers, or else you can forget about that creative energy they could add to whatever you're trying to do. Yeah.
Awesome.
For me, it's a bit different because I set up shop in Thailand. I was not speaking the language at all when I came there, so it couldn't really be like a group of friends. I wouldn't know what they were talking behind my back, or even in front of me, for that matter. So yeah, the way I set it up, we have one office. We are 17 right now, and there's 2 persons in the company who take the role as producers and who really manage the daily operations of the company. Whereas I am more into business development and strategic decisions and such.
I find it funny that as the largest studio on the panel, I'm the one that's totally virtual. We've actually got 85 people, and we don't have an office anywhere. We have no intention of ever having an office anywhere. Everybody works from home. Most of them don't wear pants. The studio, though, is broken up into a number of sort of independent groups, and each one of those groups works on a different project. Most of our project teams are between 6 to 10 people, and those project teams have a huge level of autonomy. So, I kind of go visit them every now and then and talk to them online and see how things are going. But largely they run themselves. So our studio is kind of better thought of as a loose confederation of small independent studios that all share technology and share services. We also have some other project groups that are service-based groups. So we have a sound group, we have a testing group, we have a localization group, we have an Android port group, we have an iOS port group. And so basically each project group works on an original IP, and then when that IP is ready to go be made into an Android game or an iOS game or to be localized, it goes to that support group, and that support group works with the original team to make that thing happen. And they largely do that without any interference from me. Mostly I kind of hang out and drink gin. So
yeah, and post on Facebook.
And I do a lot of Facebook posting. Like
He's a
way
Facebook poster, yeah.
But I can't blame you for that, though.
So we don't have any time left. I really want to thank you guys. You guys have been awesome, and I really hope that this information has been useful for all of you. We're going to step outside in case you have any other additional questions. Feel free to talk to us. We're here to help. Thank you very much.
Let me add one point.
Yeah.
If they don't give you money up front, they're not a publisher. Repeat after me. If they don't give you money up front, they're not a publisher.
Thank you, everybody.